Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Leverage Redemption. A great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, this episode revolves around the team going after a pair of dirty cops. Kira being played by Alana Masterson, which I saw her at first. I was like, wait, is that who I think it is? And it totally was Alana Masterson. I was like, that's so cool. Obviously, I best know her as Tara from The Walking Dead. And also her partner is Billy. He's played by Derek Thieler, I believe is his name. And I was like, why do I recognize this guy? Well, one thing I recognize him from, I only saw a couple episodes of it, but there's a show called Baby Daddy that was on, I think this is before it became Freeform, when it was still ABC Family. But the other thing I knew him from was, I didn't realize was American Gods. He played Donar, Odin's son. So I was like, all right, that's cool. Either way. That opening was actually kind of sad. I mean, because there's this whole conversation about like, hey, like, right, they're getting pressure from like their boss, who's also getting pressure from some like higher up people to like kind of make more and more busts, because they're basically some people are pushing politicians or whatever to like renovate, like change this area, and so they're trying to bust people in a very specific neighborhood and stuff like that. And they ended up like framing Romero, like put drugs on him and a gun. I was like, man, that sucks. And he's like, that's not mine. And he's begging. He's like, please, I need my job. And they threw him in. And Harry's trying to tell, like, I believe the lawyer who's the prosecutor, like, hey, something's fishy about this, but she won't listen. It's like, it's an open and shut case. And so Harry's, telling Sarah, who he's kind of protegeing, like, hey, just keep at it. You can win this. But it's like, nah, it doesn't look good. So the team, is taking a swing at this. But Harry actually is the one that's like, oh, I'd like to take over. Brianna got to do a job this year. I'd like to do one too. Which you're like, I don't know, man. Maybe you should start off small, like kind of do one of the overseas jobs. And both Parker and Elliot said, oh, Hurley. I'm like, yeah. Oh God, I'd love you to do. I'd love a job with Harry and Hurley. Maybe him taking the reins in that particular situation, I think would be pretty dope. I'm not misremembering, right? Hurley showed up last season, didn't he? Yeah, I'm fairly certain he did. So I was like, yeah. I just get excited whenever Hurley's name pops up. I'm like, that's so dope. Anyway, tangents and all that aside, I should also note that this episode was directed by Beth Riesgraf. I think she's directed a few episodes. But this might be one of the few like I've noticed. But anyway, Sophie ends up giving Harry the opportunity, and obviously everyone's had their time at running a con, and obviously you learn that first lesson of never just have a plan A. Harry at the very least had a plan B, or at least kind of shifted into a plan B. Who knows if he had it completely worked out yet. But the thing is, and even that's the age-old lesson that Nate taught. I believe it was Hardison he taught that lesson to, that you should always have like a plan. He's like, I always have backup plans upon backup plans. That's what makes a really good mastermind. That was kind of, that's what makes a good part of the whole con process. So initially their plan was to have these Elliot, Brianna, and Parker pretend to be these FBI agents and draw Kira and Billy in. So there's like, right, they show up at a bus, they get left with the drugs, and then they get busted. And when they get busted, it's like, oh, now we got to look into every one of their cases, not just Romero's, because he's one of a few people they've been doing this to. So that was going to be the open and shut of it all, but things got expedited because Romero, the reason why they busted him in the first place and why they went after him is because his brother was part of a gang. Was it the Latin Kings? And that ended up being kind of a very interesting part to this episode. It kind of plays out in the long run because Billy's kind of the weaker link because, well, for one, he's the idiot and Kira's kind of the brain of the operation. But Kira's kind of jaded. She's like, hey, like, the fact of the matter is, this guy, his brother was a gangbanger, so obviously it's like, almost like, oh, guilt by association. Just because someone in your family is gangbanging doesn't mean you have anything to do with that. But for her, it's like, yeah, let's clean up the streets. So, for her, regardless of why it's trickling down, she thinks like, hey, we're busting the bad guys, that's all that matters. But even Billy was like, yeah, but what does this guy actually do? We kind of went about it the wrong way. So I guess they've like put pressure on people before, but they've never just straight up like even the other people they've arrested, that was them putting pressure on them, kind of like entrapping them to some extent. But I guess this is the first time they've ever straight up planted evidence for him to kind of have that response of like, what did this guy actually do that was so wrong? And it's just because of who his brother was. I mean, his brother being a part of a gang is why he's getting attacked in prison. I thought that Kira and Billy set that up, but it's just a byproduct. I mean, regardless of it, doesn't matter. He's going to go to jail. Nothing he says, no one's going to believe him anyway, because they're two decorated cops against his word and obviously his association with his brother, so that kind of put him in a very terrible situation. So, but with that, they're like, right, we need to like break him out of prison. That ended up being shifting over into plan B to make that happen. So, and that plan kind of went off. Like, they almost nailed it. They almost had it, except Kira, regardless of being a criminal, is actually good at her job. And she recognized his limp. And obviously for Harry, he's like, oh, he didn't see the contingencies. Like, right, he didn't account for Harry didn't account for Romero's limp. He didn't account for the fact is that in prison someone would come after him because of his brother's associate. So he didn't catch all the details. Once again, this is his first con that he's kind of running, and regardless of everything, Sophie wanted to, it's like, right, give him an opportunity to spread his wings and fly, because once again, everyone in the crew, like, they've been at this a lot longer than them, plus everyone else eventually had their own turn because Nate kind of gave everyone an opportunity to run, despite him being the control freak that he is and kind of want to run things on his own, so, but yeah, it does kind of definitely has that same flavor as when Hardison did his first con, the Iceman, But Elliot was on the inside protecting Romero, and I love that whole bit where he was like, this guy's not even that guy's brother. This ain't even that Romero's brother. This guy's just like a line cook at a restaurant, which is a very important job. Trying to but I'm not going to let you think, I'm not going to minimize your job. Your job is actually really good, and it's a very hardworking job kind of thing. It's like, out of anyone, of course, Elliot would, especially say that, which I thought that was just kind of a nice little touch to it. And then proceeded to beat up the guys that were trying to kill him. So, because they had set up this kind of treasure hunt for Kira and Billy, because I love the whole thing. For one, knowing that Sophie, I'm kind of backtracking a little bit. I love the whole fact is that Sophie has a chest of like all the greatest grifts in history, and the name of this job was the Turkish prisoner job. That's actually like a very, very old school one going back to World War I, and like how that was implemented. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. Like, there's certain elements of that where it's just kind of like, right, you're spinning this story of gold, and it's like, oh, this person's literally going to walk you out of the prison themselves because they think you're the only means of. So there's certain elements to this. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the episode where Parker, I forgot Danny Glover's character, but he was like someone from, was that World War II? And it kind of reminded me of that because that ended up being kind of a bit of a treasure hunt. But it also reminded me of, what was it? Was it just Arabian Nights? I don't remember the classic story where it's like, right, this woman, to keep herself safe, she basically as long as like she kept the Sultan like on the edge of his seat with like 1,001 tales, she was able to survive because she just kept the story going and going. It kind of felt like, I'm making quite the stretch here, but it kind of reminded me of that, like of spinning a story of gold to keep someone captivated and keep them on the hook, essentially. And that ends up being the basis of this. And the gold that they're looking for is the this hidden stash of 10 million. It's kind of like a urban legend, and they use that. Obviously, Parker and Brianna ended up, doing their death performance. And also you have Sophie playing this Colombian bad guy. And so I thought that was interesting. And obviously Elliot and Romero ended up being like, hey, you need our help to kind of make this happen. I also love when it's like, when Kira's like, oh, plan, this whole operation plan, and then Billy was like, Fertilance. And she's like, shut up, Fertilance. I was like, I love how she's so mean to him, constantly calling him more. He's like, hey, I told you to stop calling me that. I told you I've suffered quite a few concussions. I was like, he did seem like an idiot. He also seemed like, I almost felt a little bad for him because I'm like, hey, you seem like you're kind of a nice enough dude. You crossed the line, but it seems like, hey, I thought maybe you could be. He ends up being the easier target to break later, but I thought maybe he tried to do the right thing. But the moment Kira was like, "Oh, we need to kill Elliot Romero," like he didn't really help. He didn't really do anything. He was just going to let that. He was going to let that shit fly. But I love the whole like death performance of like, oh my god, we were killed by these alligators, which I love that Billy was shitting himself and like, oh, what, oh, the alligators, we need to get out of here. And he was so scared. He talked about like, oh, I tied the boat. It's like, no, you didn't. You threw the rope down, you liar. And she's just so frustrated with him. So I was wondering how that was all going to play out in the long run. Like, I was like, hey, they're going to get sent to this random house. Like, how's that all going to work out? Turns out the random house was the house of the prosecutor. It's like, cool. So that really blew up in their faces. And now Harry had the ammunition. Not only did this set up a situation that the charges against Romero could be dropped, but also now they could look into some of the busts that are happening. And obviously this trickling down from people trying to buy up these houses in these neighborhoods. So like they're putting pressure on cops to make more busts in a very specific area. So we didn't get to the tippity top of that situation, but it is a larger problem of this situation here. So, and turns out Billy was the one that you end up breaking and he ends up ratting on Kira. So very, very interesting, developments. Also, really quickly, I love that we keep going back to Plan M. I get it. It's a reference thing. Like I think it was like earlier this season or maybe even last season. It might have been earlier this season that I remembered what Plan M is. Typically, Plan M always involves Hardison dying, if I remember correctly, which I'm sure Hardison's like, dude, it's been years. Can we stop going all the way to Plan M? How about we stop at Plan L? Can we do that? Or how about we go from like L to N and just skip over M? How about we do that? Because it's like, I'm not even here. I'm not officially part of the team. Like, it makes you wonder, it's like, does this Plan M adjust to like, well, there's no Hardison, but so it still applies to someone on the team dying in some shape or form. It's like, how about we just get rid of this cursed Plan M? But I love that Sophie ended up, the reason why she gave him so much leeway, because she ends up talking about like conning is what it is. That, it's basically kind of like, almost she kind of calls so many things like, if something's kind of manipulated to make you see things a certain way or feel a certain way, everything's a con in some shape or form, right? And it's like, yeah, we're con artists. And so she looks at conning as like a blank canvas and that everyone has their own particular styles and skill sets to, everyone's going to view it a different way. Parker's going to view it a very different way than Elliot, and so will you, because you are a lawyer. Which even he's like, maybe I'll go back to law when this is all said and done. She's like, yeah, maybe you will someday. But till then, it's like you have a very, you light up in the courtroom, and it's like you are able to solve this only the way you can because of your lawyer skills. Everyone's like circumstances and their lens of the world influence. She's like, yeah, like we've got this person and a clockmaker who are running crews. It's like, yeah, people from different backgrounds who are able to kind of apply that. Once again, it just shows you just like, it's like crazy to think about just like the international team. Which I did stumble on. I was looking online. I did stumble on. I haven't seen any of it. I have to try. Like I just saw like something of it. I haven't seen any of it. But I do need to track down the Korean leverage, because like the way someone was talking about it. So I forgot. It was a while back. Someone had commented on something, kind of alluding to the fact is that the Korean leverage is canonical. That they reference a character that's one of the characters from the Korean leverage adaptation. So I don't know if that's like kind of like how, Being Human, there's the original British series, and then there's the North American adaptation. I don't know if the Korean leverage is like, oh, this is a an adaptation, or is it supposed to be like this is somewhere in that universe, like how that's set up? I won't know until like I watch it. But either way, I just thought that was kind of just an interesting thing, you know. So Harry's gonna be a law criminal for a while, you know. But it was like, yeah, because even when you go back to being a lawyer, you won't quite be the same because you'll have a very interesting skill set to help you. So I just thought that was kind of neat. Also, Romero, Brianna's the one who ended up figuring out where the stash was and ended up giving Romero that particular house. I was like, oh, like he's like, yeah, think of this place as an investment, because he's like, oh, I've got my own house, and it's like, this is the place where the stash was. She calculated where everything was, and he got the 10 million. So that kind of worked out. Well, not kind of, it super worked out. So Deluxe is just another fun episode. I think it's because I've seen her as Tara, which Tara made some mistakes here and there, but overall she was a good person. So seeing Alana Masterson, cause I think The Walking Dead might be the only thing I've seen that she's been. I'm sure she's been in other things, but that's the thing I know her for it, because she was on. She was on The Walking Dead for a couple, like, 5-ish years. So seeing like that contrast between her as Tara versus her as Kira just kind of like messed with my head a little bit. I was like, oh no, don't make Alana Masterson the bad guy in this. And they're like, no, she's the bad guy. She's a dirty cop, you know? So, but either way, I'm very, very interested to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.